Sup anime fans. Today me is gonna do 2 stories cause I've been busy farming. It's kind of cool that people like the idea of farming in Minecraft and then they added it to a real life. Notches OP. Regardless, welcome to today's Daily Neko report. News you can meowsly trust. Straight from the kitten's paw. Today's story is written by not one, but 2 lawyers. Jack Goldsmith and Andrew Keenwoods, on April 26, 2020, for The Atlantic. Internet speech will never go back to normal. In the debate over freedom versus control of the global network, China was largely correct, and the US was wrong. Get your snacks and orange juice cause this gonna be good. What is it with lawyers these days? Yesterday's lawyer had a retarded take on homeschooling. Now we have these 2 with an in-depth breakdown of the future of the internet. There's only good lawyers and bad lawyers. Yin and yang. 2 sides of the same coin. Okay, here we go. COVID-19 has emboldened American tech platforms to emerge from their defensive crouch. Before the pandemic, they were targets of public outrage over life under their dominion. Today, the platforms are proudly collaborating with one another and following government guidance to censor harmful information related to the virus. And they are using their prodigious data collection capacities, in coordination with federal and state governments, to improve contact tracing, quarantine enforcement, and other health measures. As Facebook's Zuckerberg recently boasted, the world has faced pandemics before, but this time we have a new superpower, the ability to gather and share data for good. Civil rights groups are tolerating these measures. Emergency times call for emergency measures, but are also urging us with return to normal when the virus ebbs. We need to make sure that, when we've made it past this crisis, our country isn't transformed into a place we don't want to live, warns the American Civil Liberties Union's Jay Stanley. Any extraordinary measures used to manage a specific crisis must not become permanent fixtures in the landscape of government intrusions into daily life, declares the Electronic Frontier Foundation, a digital rights group. These are real worries, since, as the foundation notes, life-saving programs such as these, and their intrusions on digital liberties, tend to outlive their urgency. We need look no further for evidence of this than the Patriot Act. Snowden's revelations on mass surveillance are such clear, crucial, and recent events that anyone engaged in politics should share these concerns. Following the events of 9/11, and likely encouraged by our fear of uncertainty and the desire for government strength, the Bush administration brought into being a Pandora's box we no longer want to close. It survived the Obama administration. It will survive the Trump administration. And it will likely survive all future administrations. The power of surveillance we've permitted to these agencies is too good and too useful to give up. Let's not make the same mistake again. But the extraordinary measures we are seeing are not all that extraordinary. Powerful forces were pushing toward greater censorship and surveillance of digital networks long before the virus jumped out of the wet markets in Wuhan, and they will continue to do so once the crisis passes. The practices that American tech platforms have undertaken during the pandemic represent not a break from prior developments, but an acceleration of them. Here the lawyers are correct. These censorship and surveillance tactics have already been developed and used, and we are indeed accelerating them during this crisis. But that doesn't make it right, or good. Just because we have it doesn't mean we should use it. Censorship and surveillance are a weapon. They should be treated as such. If I'm carrying a firearm, it's my duty and responsibility as a responsible gun owner to de-escalate situations and avoid conflict. I don't go out looking for fights and pull out my thingy-wingy at the first guy who insults me or threatens me. Ideally it'd be used as a last resort. I don't believe we're at the stage in this pandemic where we should be deploying our last resort or fortifying in position to defend our life to the death. The wars for fresh water and food haven't even started yet. These accelerations and willful participation by tech companies is the wrong move and worthy of everyone's condemnation. Furthermore, let's remember that Susan Wojcicki stated that YouTube will remove anything that goes against the stance of the World Health Organization. And then remember that on January 14 the World China Organization tweeted that China has found that there is no clear evidence of human-to-human transmission of the Shanghai shakes. After a few weeks of spread and contradictory information coming out of Chinese citizens, and videos of welding people into their homes. Thanks Susan. Well job. Keep it up. Proud of you baby girl. You disappoint me. As surprising as it may sound, digital surveillance and speech control in the United States already show many similarities to what one finds in authoritarian states such as China. Constitutional and cultural differences mean that the private sector, rather than the federal and state governments, currently takes the lead in these practices, which further values and address threats different from those in China. But the trend toward greater surveillance and speech control here, and toward the growing involvement of government, is undeniable and likely inexorable. In the great debate of the past 2 decades about freedom versus control of the network, China was largely right and the United States was largely wrong. Significant monitoring and speech control are inevitable components of a mature and flourishing internet, and governments must play a large role in these practices to ensure that the internet is compatible with a society's norms and values. I agree. And our norms and values include the right of speech and protection against unreasonable searches and seizures. So, in other words, stop tracking my network and reading my emails, you fucking dickholes. Come back with a warrant. You may not care for the law, but I sure do. That you gleefully dance on my protections and ignore them is an assault on the soul of this country, and I will be your enemy till the day that I die. So yes, our descent into Chinese surveillance and censorship is inevitable, but the longer we can delay it the better. You don't have rights if you don't defend them. And you can't defend them if you don't know what they are. For context, these lawyers take us back to the 1990s. China quickly became worried about unregulated digital speech, both as a threat to the Communist Party's control and to the domestic social order more generally. It began building ever more powerful mechanisms of surveillance and control to meet these threats. Other authoritarian nations would follow China's lead. In 2009, China, Russia, and other members of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization announced their agreement on cooperation in the field of international information security. The agreement presciently warned of a coming information war, in which internet platforms would be weaponized in ways that would threaten nations' social and political systems. In these, and so many other ways, the public internet in its first 2 decades seemed good for open societies and bad for closed ones. But this conventional wisdom turned out to be mostly backwards. China and other authoritarian states became adept at reverse engineering internet architecture to enhance official control over digital networks in their countries and thus over their populations. And in recent years, the American public has grown fearful of ubiquitous digital monitoring and has been reeling from the disruptive social effects of digital networks. 2 events were wake-up calls. The first was Edward Snowden's revelations in 2013 about the astonishing extent of secret U.S. government monitoring of digital networks at home and abroad. The second wake-up call was Russia's interference in the 2016 election. As Barack Obama noted, the most consequential misinformation campaign in modern history was not particularly sophisticated. This was not some elaborate, complicated espionage scheme. It also highlighted how legal limitations grounded in the First Amendment, freedom of speech and press, and the Fourth Amendment, privacy, make it hard for the U.S. government to identify, prevent, and respond to malicious cyber operations from abroad. These constitutional limits help explain why, since the Russian electoral interference, digital platforms have taken the lead in combating all manner of unwanted speech on their networks and, if anything, have increased their surveillance of our lives. But the government has been in the shadows of these developments, nudging them along and exploiting them when it can. I believe there is a major difference, and a huge degree of separation between unwanted speech and dangerous speech. For instance, I don't want to be retarded, but I am. So it doesn't matter if I have unwanted things in life, 'cause reality is here to slap me in the face. Similarly, digital platforms may not want certain kinds of things on their platform, and unfortunately it is their right to remove it. But then it becomes their responsibility to properly wield and use their ban hammers and censorship hammers. But, much like the Gestapo police officers who want to arrest someone who's out in the park with their kid, they're going too far, and are stifling healthy discussions and healthy doubts and skepticism about government response, scientific findings, infection data, and so on. We don't find the truth by accepting the information that lands in front of us, no matter how credible, official, or popular the source. I believe we should have our healthy skepticism, and use it. To simply accept what any government or institution says, no matter how seemingly official, is a failure on our part. The scientific method didn't come to fruition accidentally. We all had our hypotheses and ideas. Let's throw them in there and have our thoughts duke it out and try to advance on this. Also, let's not forget the lamestream media has been late to information, and continue to lag behind on data. Doctors on YouTube figured out in January that everyone should wear a mask to help prevent the spread of the Winnie the Flu based on data where masks are common and a social norm. New York City didn't have any mask requirements until a few weeks ago. New York City Mayor de Blasio refused to close down schools, citing information that children tend to get very mild cases. But he forgetted that these children likely travel in crowded buses and subways to get to and from school and may live with older family members who are at higher risk of severe illness. And New York City Department of Health Commissioner, Dr. Oxy Reyes-Barbeau, encouraged people to celebrate the Chinese Lunar New Year during the first handful of cases in the city. And let's not forget Nancy Pelosi also telling people to go celebrate Chinese New Year. and then having the gall to do an interview and show us her ice cream storage in her expensive ice box while people are starving and waiting on food lines and ensure how they're going to feed their family. It's fucking infuriating. It's embarrassing. But it's not unwanted. And I don't want it censored. Because when things aren't censored, we get to see how stupid and evil and hypocritical people really are. Shine that light into the shadow and reveal what is. These are only the handful of flaws I can think of off the top of my head. You can't get any more official than that. So sorry if I had doubts about what my government says, or what the news says. These are the people who should have delegated researchers on the case in January, digging into the information coming out of China and Italy and Spain and France. But based on New York City's reaction to the virus, it looks like they were just sitting on their asses, completely ignoring the fact that the biggest city in the world might get people flying in from China, or the vicinity, prior to Trump's flight ban. These same people spend their time with, and sleep in the same bed as our official news outlets. So fuck you. You're slow. You're wrong. You don't know everything. You make mistakes. If you're going to remove content off of your platforms, then I suggest you appoint a chief officer of journalistic integrity to start considering removing CNN clips that have misinformation. Meritocracy, motherfucker. Over the past decade, network surveillance has grown in roughly the same proportion as speech control. Indeed, on many platforms, ubiquitous surveillance is a prerequisite to speech control. The public has been told over and over that the hundreds of computers we interact with daily, smartphones, laptops, desktops, automobiles, cameras, audio recorders, payment mechanisms, and more, collect, emit, and analyze data about us that are, in turn, packaged and exploited in various ways to influence and control our lives. We have also learned a lot, but surely not the whole picture, about the extent to which governments exploit this gargantuan pool of data. Police use subpoenas to tap into huge warehouses of personal data collected by private companies. They have used these tools to gain access to doorbell cameras that now line city blocks, microphones in the Alexa devices in millions of homes, privately owned license plate readers that track every car, and the data in DNA databases that people voluntarily pay to enter. Imagine being a retard with Alexa or Echo. You guys are literally too privileged and comfortable for your own good. America's private surveillance system goes far beyond apps, cameras, and microphones. Behind the scenes, and unbeknownst to most Americans, data brokers have developed algorithmic scores for each one of us, scores that rate us on reliability, propensity to repay loans, and likelihood to commit a crime. Uber bans passengers with low ratings from drivers. Some bars and restaurants now run background checks on their patrons to see whether they're likely to pay their tab or cause trouble. Facebook has patented a mechanism for determining a person's creditworthiness by evaluating their social network. These and similar developments are the private functional equivalent of China's social credit ratings, which critics in the West so fervently decry. The US government, too, makes important decisions based on privately collected pools of data. The Department of Homeland Security now requires visa applicants to submit their social media accounts for review. And courts regularly rely on algorithms to determine a defendant's flight risk, recidivism risk, and more. Imagine willfully handing over the info on your social media accounts. Lol. Fuck off. I always say I don't have one. If you know I have one and know my account, then review it. Dumbasses. I'm not telling you shit, asshole. The response to COVID-19 builds on all these trends, and shows how technical wizardry, data centralization, and private-public collaboration can do enormous public good. As Google and Apple effectively turn most phones in the world into contact tracing tools, they had the ability to accomplish something that no government by itself could: nearly perfect location tracking of most the world's population. That is why governments in the United States and around the world are working to take advantage of the tool the two companies are offering. Apple and Google have told critics that their partnership will end once the pandemic subsides. Facebook has said that its aggressive censorship practices will cease when the crisis does. But when COVID-19 is behind us, we will still live in a world where private firms vacuum up huge amounts of personal data and collaborate with government officials who want access to that data. We will continue to opt into private digital surveillance because of the benefits and conveniences that result. Firms and governments will continue to use the masses of collected data for various private and social ends. COVID-19 is a window into these future struggles. At the moment, activists are pressuring Google and Apple to build greater privacy safeguards into their contact tracing program. Yet the legal commentator Stuart Baker has argued that the companies are being too protective, that existing privacy accommodations will produce a design that raises far too many barriers to effectively tracking infections. Even some ordinarily privacy-loving European governments seem to agree with the need to ease restrictions for the sake of public health, but the extent to which the platforms will accommodate these concerns remains unclear. We are about to find out how this trade-off will be managed in the United States. The surveillance and speech control responses to COVID-19, and the private sector's collaboration with the government in these efforts, are a historic and very public experiment about how our constitutional culture will adjust to our digital future. On top of the fact that legislation regarding technology is so far behind, and also on top of the fact that most representatives and senators are old-ass boomers who can't begin to comprehend how powerful and amazing the internet is, we also have to contend with corporations and lobbyists, who have more direct contact and larger wallets with which to inform or persuade our representatives than we do. As always, protecting what we have is an uphill battle, and it'll be a difficult one, but it's definitely one worth the effort. Now is our time. Gamers, rise up. If you want a good tool to help protect your privacy, why not try the Brave browser? It's a browser built on Chromium. Looks like Chrome. Acts like Chrome. But it isn't, and it doesn't send any data to Google. Unless you want it to by logging into your Google accounts, XP. But by default it comes with an ad blocker, automatic HTTPS upgrades, and removes a lot of useless shit on web pages. Additionally, the browser can show you ads, if you opt into it, and trade you some of your data in exchange for some basic attention token, currently valued at about 18 US cents. You can earn these over time and support me and my content by tipping my videos, or you can withdraw it and convert it to some other cryptocurrency or fiat currency and actually buy things or invest it or save it. At least this way you get something in exchange for your data. Go to brave.zizegg.com or use my link in the description to download the browser with my referral link. Then just use the browser for 30 days and you'll support me with some tokens. If you want to support me more, turn on the ads, earn more tokens, and tip me if you think I make good stuff and deserve it. Much appreciated. After reading all this stuff on tech and censorship, I think we should take some cues from Zimbabwe. I don't know how to pronounce this site's name. I'll just call it iHarem. Zimbabwe minister taunts dog eating Chinese, offers them beef instead. A Zimbabwe minister has sparked controversy after offering to export beef to China, because he wants the Chinese to stop eating dogs, cats, snakes, bats, monkeys, baboons and other wildlife. Energy Mutodi, who is a member of the ruling ZANU-PF party and the Deputy Minister of Information, Publicity and Broadcasting Services, said that the consumption of wildlife in Asia and some parts of Africa is the reason why humans are contracting diseases such as COVID-19 and Ebola. Mutodi then cheekily said that Zimbabwe was hoping to export huge amounts of beef to China, Indonesia and other Asian countries in an effort to stop this. To buttress his point, the minister shared a video from Al Jazeera News which showed a wet market in China where things like snakes, dogs and some other wildlife are being openly displayed for sale. In the video, the World Health Organization is calling on Asian countries to institute stricter standards for safety and hygiene when the wet markets reopen. There's a blurred still of the video on screen but I won't be showing it. Mutodi, who is fast building a reputation as a garrulous motor mouth, seems to be under the impression that the consumption of wildlife and other domestic animals is down to the lack of beef. I don't think he's under the impression of that at all. I think he's memeing on China. Kite. Do you write for CNN? You gays have no sense of humor. Diva Gremlin. Many Zimbabwean social media users quickly schooled the minister over his reckless and misinformed taunting of the Chinese. Many warned that he was insulting China, the one country the Zimbabwe government claims to be all-weather friends. However, it seems that Mutodi was not moved. Despite the avalanche of responses to his post, the minister did not delete his tweet or attempt to spin it in any way. Eve Smug. The Chinese embassy in Zimbabwe was yet to respond to the minister's position at the time of publishing. However, barely 24 hours earlier, Chinese Deputy Ambassador to Zimbabwe, Zhao Baogong, attracted a lot of criticism on Twitter when he appeared to celebrate the deaths of Zimbabwe healthcare workers who succumbed to the coronavirus in the UK. In the tweet, which has since been deleted, Zhao seemed happy that Zimbabweans were dying in the UK because it underlined how well the Chinese are apparently treating Africans in their country. Zhao's tweet seems to have been a response to reports that Africans in China were being racially abused and inhumanely treated by locals who accused them of having the coronavirus. This guy is the Daily Neko's badass of the week. Trump should hire this guy onto his meme team. And me too. I'll make lots of memes, and shit on the lamestream media. Put me in, coach. Imagine having balls and a backbone like this guy. More people should be like him and stand up to China and shit on China and make edgy jokes. See? They aren't all bad. But the Director General of the World Useless Organization is a disappointment. So sad. What a fucking well, that's all I have for today. While I'm working on my farm, I'll try to do only a few stories per day. Also, I know you Americans got your Trump bucks and maybe unemployment. Give me your monies. How do you not have $5? $5 a month. If you're not out there working, you should be finding ways of getting money, and then give it to me. If you can't afford to donate $5 for the content you watch, then you're just irresponsible with your moans. I'll know how to use it more better. Links to give me money are below. Give me your monies or I'm going to choke you with my thighs. But thanks for watching and thanks for supporting with Brave. Remain vigilant and don't get trolled out there. Suck my dick, faggots.